Ashley Brooks stepped through the iron gates of Lincoln High School in Columbus, Ohio, feeling like she was walking into an arena. As one of the rare few black students in this sprawling school, she constantly felt the weight of probing eyes, stares that seemed to ask, "Who is she to show up here?" To Ashley, Lincoln High wasn't just a place for learning, it was a battlefield, where every step she took was scrutinized, every word she uttered could be turned into a weapon against her. She realized her place from the very first days, always on the sidelines. That truth was reinforced daily in ways both subtle and blatant. Teachers seemed to be harsher with her, a furrowed brow when she answered slowly, a sharp criticism when her homework wasn't flawless. Security guards shadowed her like ghosts, their suspicious gazes sweeping over her every move as she navigated the crowded hallways, and her classmates, they didn't hesitate to whisper just loud enough for her to hear. What's she doing here? Probably just the school needing a black kid to flaunt diversity. Her dad's gotta be some deadbeat who ditched her and her mom ages ago. Ashley clenched her teeth, ignoring it all. She had no other choice. If she reacted, she knew what would happen. She'd be labeled the angry black girl, the troublemaker. She'd seen it before. Other black students, pushed out of school just for daring to speak up. So she chose silence. Kept her head down in class, sat alone in a corner of the cafeteria, spoke only when forced to, and tried to fade into the shadows. But Tyler Grayson's shadow was too big, too suffocating for her to escape. Tyler was the prince of Lincoln High, handsome, wealthy, and carrying a last name that made all of Columbus bow down. His father, Judge Grayson, was a powerhouse, a man who could bend the law with a shrug. Tyler strode through the halls like a king with a smug grin and eyes that never knew fear. Teachers fawned over him, parents invited him to lavish parties at the country club, and students followed him like obedient sheep. For the past 2 months, Ashley had become his favorite pastime. It started with small things. A shove that sent her books crashing to the floor. An accidental bump in the hallway that left her stumbling. But it escalated fast. Every time she passed by, Tyler and his crew hissed venomous words, just loud enough for her to catch. "Watch out, don't get too close or she'll pick your pocket." Does she even shower? Bet she uses cheap shampoo from the corner store. Surprise, she hasn't dropped out yet. Her kind usually quits early. Their laughter rang out like blades slicing into her ears. Ashley gripped her hands tight, nails digging into her palms until they bled, but she kept walking. She'd learned long ago that speaking up changed nothing. Teachers would turn a blind eye. Principal Walsh would brush it off with a "kids will be kids," and tomorrow it would all start again, a nightmare cycle with no way out. That day was no different. Ashley sat alone in a corner of the cafeteria, dim light from the window spilling onto her simple table. She'd just unwrapped her peanut butter sandwich, a modest lunch she made herself every morning, when a rough hand snatched the brown paper bag right out of her grasp. Her heart sank before she even looked up. She already knew who it was. Tyler stood there, tall and overpowering, shaking the bag like it was something filthy. "What's for lunch, Brooks?" he sneered, ripping it open with exaggerated disgust. "Peanut butter? That's pathetic. What kind of job does your dad have to leave you eating this crap?" His friend's laughter spread through the cafeteria, sharp as shattered glass, stabbing straight into her pride. Ashley's hands curled into fists under the table, nails digging deeper into her skin. She wanted to scream, to slap that smug face, to snatch her lunch back. But she didn't. She never did. Tyler leaned in closer, his voice dripping with fake sweetness like a snake's hiss. "Hey, I'm doing you a favor here. Keep that mouth of yours shut a little. Nobody wants to hear you anyway." He tossed the sandwich over his shoulder, and it hit the cafeteria floor with a sad little plop, rolling among dust-caked shoes. Before Ashley could bend down to pick it up, Tyler's polished leather shoe stomped down, grinding it into the tiles like he wanted to erase it completely. "Oops, my bad," one of his buddies jeered, voice thick with mockery. "But she's used to picking up trash, right?" The laughter erupted again, louder, crueler. Ashley felt the world shrink, their taunts echoing in her head like a relentless horror soundtrack. Dozens of eyes locked onto her, waiting for a reaction, waiting for her to break. But she wouldn't cry, never in front of them. She stood, grabbed her backpack, pushed through the crowd, past the whispers, past the smirks, trying to keep her legs from trembling. Just as she neared the edge of the cafeteria, a sharp voice sliced through the air. "Stop it right now!" The room went dead silent, as if someone had hit a mute button. Ashley turned and saw Jake Sullivan standing there, lanky and tall, blonde hair a messy tangle like it had been whipped by the wind, blue eyes sharp as daggers. Jake was a quiet rebel, never running with Tyler's crowd, always staying out of the school's drama. Tyler smirked, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "What's up, Sullivan? You lost in some superhero movie or something?" Jake stepped forward, unflinching, his gaze locked on Tyler. "I said stop it! Leave her alone!" "Oh, feeling sorry for her?" Tyler scoffed, glancing around to rally the crowd. "Didn't know you were into playing hero for this type. Didn't know you were a punk who only picks on the weak." Jake fired back, his voice icy, each word landing like a punch. The air in the cafeteria grew taut, like a string about to snap. Tyler's face darkened, and for the first time Ashley caught a flicker of unease in his eyes. But he quickly regained his swagger, scanning the room to gauge the crowd's reaction. Maybe realizing that pushing further could cost him control, he just smirked and shook his head. "Chill out, man. I'm just messing around," he said, his tone light but laced with menace. He turned away, but not before shooting Ashley a razor-sharp glare, a silent warning. Jake watched him go, then turned to her, his voice softening. "You okay?" Ashley nodded, her throat so tight she wasn't sure she could speak. "Yeah. Mind if I sit here?" Jake gestured to the empty chair across from her. She blinked, caught off guard. "You want to sit with me?" "Why not? If I sit, maybe next time someone else will have the guts to do it too," he shrugged, flashing a small smile that unexpectedly warmed her against the cafeteria's chill. That night, Ashley got home, quietly dropped her backpack on her bedroom floor, and shut the door softly. She wasn't the type to slam doors, even when alone. She'd learned how to disappear, how to make herself small, so no one would notice. But her dad, David Brooks, the new Columbus police chief, picked up on something off. He knocked, his deep, warm voice carrying through the wood. "You okay, Ash?" "Yeah, just tired," she replied, her hand gripping the backpack strap before letting it fall onto the bed. A long pause hung in the air, then a faint sigh. "Dinner's ready in an hour." She listened to his footsteps fade before letting out a breath. Her dad had enough on his plate, moving to Columbus, taking over as police chief, cleaning up the mess left by the last guy. She wasn't about to dump school drama on him, too. She told herself she could handle it, but the next day Tyler proved she couldn't ignore him forever. Before first period, Ashley was pulling books from her locker when a hard shove from behind sent her staggering, her forehead nearly smashing into the cold metal. Tyler's laugh rang out behind her, sharp as a blade. "Oops, didn't see you there, Brooks," he said, leaning against the locker next to hers with a sinister grin. She turned, hands clenched at her sides, but stayed silent. That's what he wanted, a reaction, an excuse to take it further. But Tyler wasn't satisfied with her silence. By lunch, a rumor had swept through the cafeteria like a small storm. Heard Ashley tried to swing at Tyler, then cried and begged for forgiveness. She froze mid-step, her mouth dry, feeling the weight of the world's eyes on her. Tyler sat at his usual table, scrolling through his phone like it was nothing, but she knew he'd started it. Her hands gripped her sweater, her pride torn to shreds. But then Jake showed up again, quietly sliding into the seat across from her, ignoring the stares of the entire school. The next morning, as Ashley walked into school, she sensed a shift in the air. The way kids looked at her wasn't the same, not just the usual cold indifference or hidden smirks, but now curiosity, maybe even a hint of fear. Whispers trailed her like shadows. Some pointed, some smirked, others just stared. Near the lockers, she caught a group of girls huddled together, eyes flicking between her and their phones, their laughter cutting and cruel like knives. Her stomach twisted. Something was coming, she could feel it. When she reached her locker, Tyler was already there, leaning against the wall like he owned the place. Arms crossed, that smug grin plastered on his face. Jake was a few steps away, talking to someone, oblivious. Ashley focused on her lock, telling herself to stay calm. But Tyler's voice cut through, soft but mocking. "Liking your new hero, Brooks? Think Sullivan's gonna save you forever?" Ashley stiffened, but she shot back, her voice low but steady. "I don't need saving. You're the one who needs a babysitter." "Cute," Tyler laughed, loud and harsh, leaning in so close she could feel his breath on her face. "But you know I always win. You'll fade away, or I'll make you disappear." Her hands trembled, not from fear, but from a smoldering fire igniting inside her. She'd swallowed her anger for months, buried it deep under a shell of silence. But this time, something in her cracked. Before she could say anything, Jake stepped up, his voice even but edged with danger. "Something going on here, Grayson?" "Just chatting," Tyler shrugged, but his eyes flashed with anger. "Looks more like bullying to me," Jake growled. "What's your deal? Gotta prove you're tough by crushing someone else?" Tyler smirked, raising his hands in mock surrender. "Relax, Sullivan. Just helping Brooks figure out her place." He turned to leave, but paused, glancing over his shoulder. "Check your phone, Brooks." Once he was gone, Ashley pulled out her phone, hands shaking. Notifications flooded the screen. She clicked a link and her breath caught in her throat. It was a photo of her from yesterday, when she'd shoved Tyler in the parking lot. But it had been edited. Her face twisted into an ugly snarl, hands clawed, bold red text screaming across the top. "Crazy, Ashley can't control herself." The comments below stabbed like knives. "She's legit insane. No wonder she's got no friends." Bet she went after Jake, too, probably playing the victim. Her chest tightened, heart pounding. This wasn't just a rumor anymore. It was a public attack, something people could see and believe. Jake leaned over, peering at her screen, his face darkening. "You can't let this slide, can you?" he asked, voice low. "It's fine," Ashley said, forcing her voice not to shake. "How's that fine?" Jake slammed his hand on the table, eyes blazing. "This isn't a game anymore, Ashley. They're trying to break you." She let out a hollow laugh. "And what am I supposed to do, run to Principal Walsh? You think he'll do anything when Tyler's dad practically owns this city?" Jake exhaled slowly, like he was holding back a storm. Then, without another word, he grabbed his own phone, fingers flying across the screen. Ashley frowned. "What are you doing?" "Fixing this," he muttered, voice firm. Within minutes, a new post popped up online. Jake had screenshotted the edited photo and added a caption. "This is what cowards do. Lie, smear, use power to silence the truth. Don't fall for it." Ashley's eyes widened. "Jake, you didn't have to." "I did," he cut her off, locking eyes with her. "Because if people like me don't speak up, people like Tyler keep winning." For the first time in ages, Ashley felt a spark of hope pierce through her thick exhaustion. But she should have known Tyler wouldn't let it go. By lunch, the cafeteria buzzed like a poked beehive. Jake's post had blown up, at least by Lincoln High standards. Some kids started questioning things, others dug in, insisting Ashley was just playing the victim. But Tyler was nowhere in sight. She should have known that wasn't a good sign. She was halfway through her meal when the cafeteria doors swung open. Tyler strode in, but he wasn't alone. His father, Judge Grayson, loomed behind him in a sleek black suit, and trailing them was Principal Walsh, pale as a ghost. The room fell silent. Walsh cleared his throat, staring straight at Jake. "Sullivan, we need to talk." Jake's chair scraped the floor as he stood. "Sure thing," he said, voice calm but eyes fixed on Tyler. He followed Walsh out, Tyler smirking as he passed Ashley, like he'd already won. Her stomach churned. She had a bad feeling about this. 20 minutes later, Jake returned, face unreadable. He sat down, poking at his food with his fork, saying nothing. Ashley leaned in, whispering, "What happened?" Jake's jaw tightened. "They're threatening to suspend me. Judge Grayson's calling my post defamation. Walsh says I take it down and apologize or I'm out." Ashley's blood ran cold. "What?" "Yeah," Jake said, voice bitter. "He doesn't want to fight the Graysons, so he's making me choose." Her hands balled into fists. "Of course. Tyler's dad wasn't just protecting his son. He was using his power to silence anyone who stood up to him. Jake looked at her, expression serious. "I'm not taking it down." "Jake, if they suspend you," she started, chest tightening. "Then they suspend me," he interrupted, eyes burning with defiance. "I'm not letting them scare me into shutting up." Ashley swallowed the lump in her throat. She'd spent so long feeling alone, and now, for the first time, someone was standing by her, ready to fight for what was right. She couldn't let that go to waste. She exhaled slowly, sitting up straighter. "Then we fight back." Jake grinned, the first smile of the day. "Now you're talking." Neither of them knew what would happen next, but one thing was certain: Tyler Grayson wasn't winning this time. That night, Ashley barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Tyler's mocking smirk, Judge Grayson's cold, calculating stare, and Jake's determined face as he refused to back down. The weight of it all pressed on her chest, making it hard to breathe. She'd spent so long convincing herself none of it mattered that she could endure it, and it'd eventually fade. But it wasn't fading. It was growing, spreading like wildfire, and now Jake was caught in it too. The next morning, the air at Lincoln High was thick as lead. Students whispered in hushed tones, eyes darting toward Ashley and Jake whenever they passed. They knew something was coming, but no one could have guessed how big it'd get. By second period, Jake got called to the principal's office again. Ashley watched him go, her stomach twisting into knots. 40 minutes later, he came back, face blank. He sat beside her in class, staring straight ahead. "What happened?" she asked under her breath, voice trembling. Jake exhaled, shaking his head. "Same as yesterday. They're threatening to suspend me unless I take the post down. But this time, they screwed up." Ashley frowned. "What do you mean?" Jake turned to her, his expression grim but his eyes flashing with resolve. "They called my dad." Ashley's stomach dropped. She'd never thought much about Jake's family. He never talked about them, and she'd assumed they were just a regular middle-class household getting by. But she was wrong. Jake's dad wasn't some office worker or small-time business owner. He was James Sullivan, the U.S. Attorney for the District of Ohio, a federal prosecutor with real power. And now he knew everything. By lunch, the school was buzzing like a busted beehive. Jake's dad showed up at Lincoln High with a team of federal investigators. They marched past the front desk, suits crisp, faces stone cold. Kids craned their necks from classroom windows, trying to catch a glimpse of what was happening. Ashley sat frozen in the cafeteria, stunned as it all unfolded. 30 minutes later, an announcement crackled over the intercom. All students are to remain in their classrooms until further notice. The halls emptied, classroom doors slammed shut. A few minutes later, a security officer stepped into the principal's office, and then, just like that, Principal Walsh was escorted out of the building, his face pale as paper, hands shaking as he was led to a car. Ashley's breath caught. "What just happened?" she whispered to Jake. Jake leaned back in his chair, watching Walsh get hauled off, a smirk tugging at his lips. "My dad dug something up." Ashley didn't need to ask what. Walsh had covered for Tyler, let him harass her, ignored every complaint about him, and now someone with real authority had finally done something. Word spread like wildfire. By day's end, kids were whispering in the halls. Walsh was on immediate administrative leave pending investigation. Some said he'd taken bribes from Judge Grayson. Others claimed he'd been hiding Tyler's and his friends' misdeeds for years. But the biggest shock came that night. Ashley was at home, eating dinner quietly with her dad, when the local news broke a story. Judge Grayson is facing a federal corruption probe after evidence surfaced that he used his position to intimidate school officials and obstruct justice. Sources say the investigation stems from a complaint filed by U.S. Attorney James Sullivan, whose son was allegedly threatened for defending a fellow student against Grayson's son, Tyler. Ashley's jaw dropped. Judge Grayson was under investigation. She grabbed her phone and called Jake. "You see the news?" she asked, breathless. Jake's voice was calm, but there was a clear satisfaction behind it. "Yeah, my dad doesn't mess around." "What's going to happen now?" She gripped the phone, heart racing. Jake paused for a second. "Tyler's getting expelled. My dad made sure of it. It's not just a suspension this time," he sighed. "And Judge Grayson? Let's just say he won't be on the bench much longer." Ashley sank back into the couch, feeling like a boulder had been lifted off her chest. This was real, not just another slap on the wrist. For the first time, the system had worked. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was winning. The next day at school, Tyler was gone. His locker stood empty, his classroom seat unoccupied. Whispers kicked off right away. "You hear, his dad's under investigation. They say he might get disbarred. Tyler's transferring to some private school out in the suburbs." Ashley walked the halls, a rare relief spreading through every breath. At lunch, she sat across from Jake, watching kids sneak glances at them, their expressions unreadable. Some looked impressed, others nervous. Jake smirked, taking a bite of his sandwich. "Notice how quiet they've gotten," he said, voice soft but loaded. Ashley nodded. "Yeah, they're scared. First time I've seen a guy like Tyler lose." She let it sink in. For so long she'd believed she was powerless, that Tyler and his kind would always come out on top, but that wasn't true. People like Judge Grayson only had power because they were allowed to, because people stayed quiet, because no one pushed back. But this time someone had, and this time they'd lost. Ashley took a deep breath, letting herself savor the moment. She wasn't naive. She knew this wasn't the end. There'd always be another Tyler, another Walsh, another person trying to keep people like her in their place. But now she knew something she hadn't before. She wasn't alone. And that changed everything.